What's up, legends, and welcome back to another Meta Monday video where I dedicate the first day of my week to giving you some sort of analysis or update about the current meta. Today we're going to be talking about the high tier heroes that I listed in my 2021 fall tier list and kind of give a little check-in into how they are doing today. But before we get into that, let's go back to last week's topic. I'd say last week because in theory I did this last Monday, but sometimes there's a couple Mondays in between Meta Mondays. We talked about Bigfoot versus the new Volume 2 heroes and how he kind of suffers because his 4-value versatiles aren't as good as blocks against double attacks as they are against some other heroes, and he kind of has a straightforward game plan that can be exploited by some of the new heroes. So some win rate updates, I guess. He had low to mid 40% win rates against Achilles and Yananga, and just an abysmal win rate versus Sun Wukong, but there weren't a lot of plays. There were like 40 plays total across those three characters. And now, as we've expanded the number of games that have been played, mostly due to League updating with a nice fighter stats page across all competitions, we can see that his win rate has actually increased versus Achilles. It's now slightly favorable. It's still absolutely horrible versus Sun Wukong, no surprise there. And his Yananga win rate has actually dipped slightly to about 38%. So you can see he's still not great. 54% win rate still isn't that favorable by any means. And of course, there isn't really a lot of data against Bloody Mary right now. So Chad, if you're listening to this, you need to grind some Mary Bigfoot games. We can get more data. There's actually only one game recorded on League, and I think actually Mary won that. But in theory, if I were to guess who would be favored there, it would be Bigfoot because he has 5 cancels, and that will kind of ruin Mary's day. So basically, if we're giving an update to our boy the Foot, it still doesn't look great. So what are the high tier heroes? Well, who am I referring to? Well, last year in my tier list, I ranked InGen, Little Red, and Dracula as the 3 heroes below the big 3, making up my personal high tier. And we're going to give each of them a little in-depth update and talk about some matchups that are new and upcoming in the meta, or will be upcoming very shortly. So the question to ask, since that tier list image is a little outdated, is what has changed or what will change since last fall? Well, obviously, Battle of Legends Volume 2 has released, and I believe Yananga is currently the best hero in the game, so her matchup is a little important if you want to stay in the high tier. And Sun Wukong and Achilles are both very common and very solid picks, especially to round out a Conquest roster. And all 3 of those fighters are currently in the top 10 most picked and played fighters for the Winter of Champions tournament, which, yes, isn't over, but Battle of Legends Volume 2 is very meta right now, except for Mary, but that's why we talk about her on Tuesdays. I suspect that all 3 of the Redemption Row characters, Moon Knight, Ghost Rider, and Luke Cage, will find a place in the meta, and I actually suspect that each of them will have a relatively high floor. I'm thinking low B tier or even high C tier as a nice counter pick opportunity. I think they're all going to be very solid. And more, I feel that Moon Knight will actually be the best of the 3. I previously thought it would be Luke, but I think Mooney just has a better overall matchup spread, especially against people with a ton of auto damage. Ghost Rider, I'm not really sure about him. We'll check back in a month or 2. He'll have his own Meta Monday video, don't worry. Hell's Kitchen, Daredevil, Elektra, and Bullseye I think will be less meta just for various reasons, and probably consistency for those 3 characters, but I felt it would still be good to talk about since they are the next Marvel set that is coming out. You can order it right now. I'm sure it's going to ship sometime soon, if not this week. So that's kind of the cutoff. I'm just talking about the 3 most recent sets, and including one that's coming out as we speak, which will have an impact right away, probably. So spoiler alert, if you don't want to have the Marvel set spoiled, this is your warning going forward. So let's get right in, starting with InGen. So yes, a lot of these matchups that I'm going to talk about is me speculating or using just the briefest of experience. So please leave a comment down below if I get something totally wrong or you have a different experience or a different take than me. I'd love to figure out what maybe I'm not seeing, and I'd love to have some sort of discussion with you. So there's no data or there isn't a lot of matchup data to back up these claims. I think InGen has maybe like 15 plays across the 3 Battle of Legends Volume 2 heroes that I'm talking about. So not a lot to go off of. So a lot of this is just me speculating. So double attacks hurt InGen a lot, very similar to Bigfoot, because InGen has 3 feints, 3 regroups, and 5 fours that he can use on defense. And I don't count regroups, of course, so he really has 8 block cards. And any of the double attacks wreck him pretty hard if he defends with a 4, because then he is either forced to take usually around 3 damage, 3 to 4 damage. Actually, probably on average 4, because Bloody Requiem and Jingu Bang will be a 4. The Achilles one will usually be a 5, and Yanenga's will be a 3. So if you block with a 4 and it's a double attack, the second attack will on average be a 4, which means you either eat that, which is a 14 health character with no healing, is horrible, or you play another 4 and you commit a quarter of your blocks into one of your enemy's attacks, which is just a horrible ratio. In an ideal world, you've fainted, but you can't always line those up with the mind game. So it's not a fun time for him, and he has even less total options than Bigfoot for blocking double attacks. So he does not enjoy the new set. So therefore, he is like kind of questionable into Volume 2. And like I just said, 3 of the 4 Volume 2 heroes are very popular right now, so that is not a good spot to be in. Against Achilles, this could be a close matchup simply because with your traps and workers, you can play keep away with Muldoon, especially on certain maps. I think if Muldoon is on Yukon, he will probably win, but of course, not every map has a 14 space death loop. The reason why this matchup is close is because Achilles has Spear Throw that he can recycle twice. So for 4 total copies, that's 8 auto damage on Muldoon, which means he just needs to hit you for 6, and he has 6 value attacks when he's big, 3 skirmishes and 3 handshakes. So he just really needs to play 4 of those schemes and attack you 3 times, and then he can win. He has wily fighting to deal with your workers if they are adjacent, so he has to position smart, but he can punish you for attacking him. And he can play battle hardens on defense because you're probably not going to throw out offensive feints in that matchup, because that just means you have less things to block with. So overall, I think it will be a skill-based matchup, but I think Achilles is just probably slightly favored there. Sun Wukong might be alright for InGen because your traps deal 1 damage to enemy fighters that step on them, so all the clones will die, so Wukong has to play a little bit weirdly, but again, InGen doesn't really have enough health to play around with and reliably take hits. If you take 1 undefended Ox early in the game, you're already at 7, which is the threshold that you have to defend at, which means you have to defend everything for the rest of the game, and it's just a matter of time for Wukong. Again, it comes down to InGen playing keep away, but things like infinite strikes and just wily fighting will hurt your workers a lot. And if you're defending them a bunch, I guess tactical advance exists, but eventually he will get to InGen, and then things like Jingu Bang will just kind of wreck old Robbie. So you are, I guess, alright attacking Wukong a lot just because you have double range and you don't have a lot of big value attacks. So things like Golden Chainmail and Bewilderment don't hurt as much, and Rending Shot will always trigger. Second Shot will always trigger. So I think you have to actually be aggressive considering that you have more card draw than Wukong there. So I think this one is probably close to even, if not slightly InGen favored. Although Sidious256, aka Mike, just played this in his last tournament match, and he said he was doing really well, but then he kind of ran out of steam late in the game, and Wukong recycled all 4 Phoenix forms for 12 health. So I still think he ended up winning. So it's probably all right for InGen there. Yanenga is just horrible. Stallion Charge will pop all your workers, leave you very vulnerable, and then she has a big combo turn and just runs you out of blocks. It's not fun. Ghost Rider is probably also horrible considering that he has Stallion Charge built into his ability. Yeah, you're going to have to use your traps very well in that matchup, but even still, if he's going first, oh boy. Luke Cage and Moon Knight are probably at best 50-50 matchups for you, just because both of them can hit you very hard. Luke just has 6s and 5s that he can throw out, the 5s from range, which is really good. And he has 4s like Get Paid and Still Standing, which he'll probably chuck into your workers that, unless you want to keep them alive and use leapaways on defense for the workers, like Still Standing will just trigger a bunch. And he has Where's My Money, Robert, to teleport. I guess he has to kill your workers first, but that could be used to get over trap walls. Although your traps are 8 auto damaged, and Luke only has 13 health, but a lot of times, actually, Luke probably won't take any damage if he defends with a 2 into any of your attacks, except maybe like a boosted second shot or shooter, which would deal 1, or They Should All Be Destroyed, which, depending on the traps, could deal 1 or 2, but you're getting a lot of damage in from your traps, and that's about it. Luke has Power Man to screw with your positioning and pop workers and deal 1 damage to Muldoon, which sounds really good. And Misty is ranged, so it's a lot easier for InGen when he's playing against melee characters. So I think there are things going for both sides, but I think it's definitely not InGen favored against Luke at all. And Moon Knight, he has a lot of stuff going on. For one, Moon Knight is actually surprisingly difficult to play against just because of the timing of his hero abilities. You just have to play into his game, and the timing can sometimes mess you up. Khonshu doesn't take auto damage, so he can walk over traps and just won't take any damage, which is really nice. And Moon Knight gets a free trap pop at the start of his turn. He can move 2 spaces, which could be used to pop a trap without actually like spending an action to maneuver, which is really good. So I think Moon Knight actually does fine into the traps. And Khonshu, with the big Alice bonus, can just hit really big over your defenses and only needs to hit you a couple of times. So I think your biggest strength in the Moon Knight matchup is not, he doesn't have AoE damage, so your workers will be a godsend there, but he does have Travelers of the Night to move through them, so again, probably at best a 50-50, but doesn't seem favorable to you. Although I think the Moon Knight matchup will be slightly easier than the Luke Cage one. Not entirely sure. InGen definitely gets countered by Bullseye because Bullseye can attack anywhere on the board from up to 5 spaces away, so he just does not care about your traps, does not care about your workers. He will just attack you wherever you are on the map, especially on small maps, and run you out of block cards. And it seems fun for the Bullseye side of that matchup. InGen is probably fine into Daredevil and Elektra, although Daredevil does have a scheme called Through Adversity, which can be used to move Daredevil up to 4 spaces through opposing fighter. It's like the Stallion Charge effect of 4 spaces, so that'll be good versus his workers. Daredevil plays a mean exhaustion game, so he really doesn't care about you drawing all your cards. Elektra doesn't really have a lot of health. She has a bunch of 1 health sidekicks that Remote Detonation will probably be good against, and just not a lot of health in general. And Elektra herself is melee. The hand really can't do much to Muldoon in that matchup, I think. So probably fine versus both of those, but Elektra probably is a better matchup than Daredevil. And again, all the Hell's Kitchen matchups are purely speculation based on me knowing their kits. I have no experience playing them against InGen at all. So overall, there are some bad matchups for InGen here, and just not a lot of favorable ones necessarily. He used to be the 4th best fighter in the game because he did all right into the big 3. I guess an aggro Muldoon could take down Sherlock, and just the Muldoon Bigfoot matchup was just a skill chess match. Really not good into Medusa. And against the rest of the cast, he had just a really good matchup spread that made him elite, but just not quite big 3 level. And now we can see that I think his stonk is decreasing in value a lot because he's actually getting a lot of bad matchups, especially into Volume 2, which are all the rage right now. And if you can't really do that well consistently against them, you just won't really be a super common conquest pick. The next fighter in my high tier is Little Red. The double attacks really don't bother Red because it just makes it easier for her to line up the symbols in her basket. When you know what attack's coming, you can optimize based on the options you have in your hand, and I I think it's fine. I guess they do hurt the Huntsman because he doesn't have cancels or a wide variety of cards to block with. He has a lot of 2s. He can either play Wolfskin or Stones in the Belly or Once Upon a Time. And if it's not on Pelt or Knives, he's just blocking with a blank 2 or not at all. So I think the double attacks can be used to kill Huntsman pretty quickly, but they don't actually bother Little Red herself. The Achilles matchup for Little Red is generally unfavorable because Achilles can smack you really hard over your low value blocks. He can hit for 5 or 6 over a 2, and I guess Once Upon a Time would be an even trade into a 5, but he has more health than you, especially if he kills the Huntsman first, which he can do very easily because Huntsman doesn't have any cancels for the Pat cards or the handshakes, so Pat can just kind of go ham right at the beginning of the game, especially if the Achilles player is going first. And Achilles has a ton of HP that he doesn't really care about all your auto damage because he's just going to kill you faster, I believe. So Achilles, I think, is a bad matchup for Little Red. But into both Sun Wukong and Yananga, I think Little Red has like a mid to high 50s win rate. That's slightly favorable. But against both of those heroes, that's really good considering that Sun Wukong and Yananga, I think, are the 2 stronger heroes of the 3 from Battle of Legends Volume 2 that I'm talking about. Being a melee character that's good into Sun Wukong is just awesome. You have to keep Huntsman alive, though, and if you can do that, then you'll be good, because then you can throw ranged Once Upon a Times at Wukong's actual hero. You have Hands to deal with the clones until they get Fiery Eyes. You have Path that makes Wukong position very weirdly. You just have a lot of good things going on that I think the Wukong player will be on the back foot. And unless they can nuke the Huntsman turn 2 or 3, I think Red should be fine taking hits because she can just heal it back. The Yananga matchup is a little bit closer than the Sun Wukong matchup just because you can never leave the path and hit Yananga and preferably 1 or 2 archers at least on your first turn and kind of put Yananga on the back foot already, but she can just nuke Huntsman turn 2 with a big combo turn. So you kind of both start out a little bit weak after an explosive early game, and then just throughout the late game, I think without cancels, Yananga has a hard time against Red, although there are things she can do to kind of mess up your basket without actually canceling it or discarding cards. Things like Surprise Volley and Shield Formation especially will screw with you in ways that I really don't have time or the brain power right now to elaborate on. You have Hands, which is really good for dealing with archers. Stones will always be good because it's a random discard that can't be canceled, and Yananga has high boost values. Once Upon a Time will also always trigger if you line up the symbols, of course. You just have to survive the combo turns because you don't have movement effects on your block cards, so you're going to stay in place. So if you end in Yananga's zone and she has a full hand, you might be in trouble, but this is a matchup where you actually want to use Wolf's Skin a lot and draw a bunch of cards and use Yananga's lack of draw as a big disadvantage against her. This one is closer to being 50-50, but I think it's still slightly Red favored, and it's really good that Red is good into both Yananga and Wukong. I think she's a really solid pick right now. Ghost Rider, I am not really sure about, because if he wants to vroom vroom, he has to kill Huntsman first, because if any ping damage on Red can just get healed back if the Huntsman is still alive. So Ghost Rider has to commit 4 or 5 turns to killing the Huntsman unless he wants to attack, which actually it would be a good option to attack with the 0 that can become a 5, or just the printed 5s, because Huntsman's going to defend with 2s or defensive ambushes to not defend with a 2. And Ghost Rider probably can't win as quickly as he would like to, especially against a hero with 14 health. Ghost Rider also only has 2 feints, and I don't think the boost values on Red's cards are horrible against Pen and Stare, although I guess Basket has a boost value of 3. So I'm really not sure. I'm not sure who wins that. I think a skilled Red player will probably win right now just because of all the Ghost Riders are new and inexperienced, but we'll monitor that as Ghost Rider continues to get explored. Luke Cage, you have at least 10 auto damage. You can recycle Once Upon a Time for 13 and exact lethal. This should be a very easy dub. Moon Knight, probably at best a 50-50 just because, again, he is weird. He has Conchu for big damage, and just you can't auto damage him when he is in Khonshu form. So like you can't play Mouth or Once Upon a Time as blocks against Khonshu because they just won't do anything. So they'll just be blank twos, which is horrible. And your printed values aren't the biggest to begin with. So unless you're defending with a basket or a defensive Stones in the Belly, you're going to be taking some hits. And Stones in the Belly is oftentimes just going to block for 4, and Khonshu can regularly hit for 6, 7, 8. So the Huntsman is probably going to die on Khonshu's first or second turn, especially if he can get a double attack in with Travelers of the Night. And Red will have to play very smart against Moon Knight. And having to line up her symbols against like Moon Knight's, I don't want to say symbols, but hero form. Actually, the more I talk about it, the more it seems a little bit Moon Knight favored actually to me. She's probably not great into Bullseye or Daredevil because she only has 2 cancels and none for the Huntsman. And with no after combat movement effects, Bullseye will just be able to combo turn her pretty reliably. And I think he should be able to get rid of the Huntsman very quickly. And Daredevil, he is pretty beefy. He's got pretty consistent healing. The blind boost will help him on offense a lot versus you because that can be canceled, but you only have 2 cancels, and you're probably going to want to use Big Eyes on offense, especially in this matchup. But she's probably not great into them. She's probably all right into Elektra because Elektra doesn't have a lot of health. You can never leave the path all the hand, although there are like 12 total hand sidekicks, so pathing might not be as impactful against Elektra as it is versus some other fighters, but she doesn't have a lot of health, so things like Big Mouth and Once Upon a Time will be very good into Elektra, I believe. So Little Red has a lot better of a matchup spread than I believe InGen does, and Little Red is also really good into InGen, which is why I think she is improving, while InGen right now looks like he is not. And the third fighter and the last fighter from my 2021 fall tier list high tier is Dracula. The double attack impact on Dracula is unclear to me just because Drac doesn't have a lot of blocks. He only has 12, so 2-for-1s will hurt him a little bit more on the value end, but he has decent options into all of them. Look Into My Eyes will always block the entirety of the first double attack and is fine into like Bloody Requiem, and I guess against Achilles and Yanenga, you just throw out like an exploit or a dash on the second attack and you're fine. Bidding can also just be used to avoid the double attacks, and Feint just cancels them altogether, so you're usually fine if you have the options in your hand and you know the second attack is coming at you face up. Achilles, the Drac Achilles matchup is pretty even, I'd say. Achilles hits you pretty hard, especially against your relatively low number and value of blocks, but he has to chug through your sisters, and unless he plays an offensive Skirmish or Hermes, you will be able to ping him if he ends your turn next to you, because you should be kiting with advantage in that matchup. So you'll have a bunch of cards and you'll dig through your deck about as fast as he will, and so you should have the block options available. You'll deal him 1 or 2 damage every single turn. I guess it just depends whether or not he can hit you hard enough to kill you before he gasses himself out. Sun Wukong, this is a horrible, horrible matchup for Drac. Go watch To the Tabletop /PoindexterG. He uploaded my round 4 match versus Jakku, and game 3 of that match was my Sun Wukong versus Jack's Drac, and it's horrible for Drac. He basically has to get really, really lucky and land a huge beast form when Sun Wukong doesn't have a Bewilderment or Golden Chainmail in hand, and he really doesn't have any good ways to get rid of those options besides ambushes, but that's still only 2. It's not good for Drac there. Yanenga is also horrible because Stallion Charge exists. She can delete all your sisters, which means you lose access to ravening damage And Yananga is just very, very tanky, and without that extra ravening damage, you just probably won't be able to have a big enough beast form to hit over her and her archers, even though her highest value block is like a Jaws or a Skirmish. Ghost Rider is also horrible because he has Stallion Charge on demand with his ability, especially if he's going first. He's just going to delete all your sidekicks early, and then you just have to rely on a bigger beast form for more damage. And Ghost Rider has things like Penance Stare, which will be a 7 or an 11 on defense against beast form, so not looking too good for Drac there either. Against Luke Cage, he should be slightly favored because let's say both beast forms get trash talked, that's still 4 damage. You can get 2 damage from Prey Upon, which means you just need to get 7 damage out of pings and ravenings. And if Luke Cage wants to come up and actually hit Drac, he doesn't have movement effects on his cards, I believe, so you'll always be able to ping him if you're kiting with advantage, which you should be against a slow, lumbering melee character. And ravening, you can probably get like 3 from a big one early, and then your sisters are just going to die because like Momentous Shift is a guaranteed kill on them. So if you can get like 5 damage from your ravening, and I guess like just even like 3 damage from a ravening, and then like 4 pings should be fine, because Luke probably will want to attack you more than 4 times in a game. Although I guess you need to get rid of Misty first, because from range you won't be able to ping her. If you land an uncancelled beast form even, you can probably win sooner. It's just about lining up all those pieces before Luke will demolish you. Moon Knight, he has some weird stuff going on. I'm not entirely sure, just because the more I talk about him, the more I think Moon Knight will actually be very meta, because he's very hard to play around. He has weird stuff going on with his form timing. You can't ping him, prey upon him, or Ravening Seduction Khonshu, because he won't take auto damage. And that's a little tricky, I guess. The Moon Knight hop can be used to not maneuver up to a sister and just attack her first action. Although he doesn't have AoE damage, which is probably good for keeping your sisters alive in the long run, but he can just attack them, and you probably don't want to waste block cards on your sisters. So I don't know how much of an impact they're going to have. It's basically just a normal Drac game. Some good things going for you is you can bidding. Insanity will guide you, which is a card that Moon Knight usually doesn't want to play. So if you bidding and you don't see any feints, I guess that sucks, but then you can just make him play that horrible card. And even if he's Khonshu, he won't deal you any damage, because that will just be a 3. But I'm not entirely sure who will be favored. Right now, I'd say a skilled Drac would probably beat Moon Knight, but we'll see how the Moon Knight players develop in the next coming months. He's probably all right into Hell's Kitchen, just because Elektra and Bullseye are pretty squishy, although Bullseye will be able to attack you a lot and wear down your relatively low amount of block cards. Not sure about Daredevil, though, because, again, Through Adversity, which was really good against the InGen workers, will be really good against your sisters. They probably won't have a huge impact at all, and you just don't attack a lot. I don't think you'll pressure Daredevil enough, because besides your Feeding Frenzies, that won't deal any damage, your ambushes that might wreck Daredevil's low hand count, and Beast Form, Daredevil should be able to survive that, especially if he's cycling back block cards, good block cards, with Breather. So actually, I think that's pretty Daredevil favored, now that I'm saying that. So I'm not entirely confident in Drac's ability versus Hell's Kitchen, but it doesn't seem horrible. So overall, I think Drac gets shafted the most by these new sets. He just has a ton of bad matchups, and basically like one good matchup that he's only really like slightly favored in. So let's do a quick recap. Let's use some actual numbers so you know I'm not just like talking out of my butt. Over the Summer of Legends tournament in fall of 2021, Muldoon had a 50% win rate over 99 plays. Little Red had a 52% win rate over 86 plays, and Drac had a 53% win rate over 96 plays. So those are kind of the baseline numbers that I'm comparing the current numbers to from the Winter of Champions tournament, which is just starting round 7 out of 7 of Swiss. So there's a little bit more Summer of Legends data because that actually has the top 8 bracket. We're missing the final Swiss round and the top 8 bracket of the Winter of Champions data, but it's relatively close to being the same number. So I think it's a valid comparison to make. So over the Summer of Legends numbers, InGen actually had the most plays at 99. Drac had the second most, and Little Red had the fourth most. InGen had the third highest win rate, I'm assuming behind Sherlock and Medusa. Probably should have checked that before recording, but whatever. Drac had the fifth highest win rate, and Little Red had the sixth highest win rate. So overall, all 3 of these characters were in the top 4 most played, which makes sense because they're high tier, which means you'll pick big 3, then you'll pick some of these characters maybe, and the big 3 will get banned, and these characters will get to be played more. And they were all in the top 6 in win rate, which is really good. So they were very popular. All in the top 4 and most played, all in the top 6 highest win rate. Makes sense why they were high tier. So for the Winter of Champions numbers, Muldoon has a 24% win rate over 45 plays, a significant decrease in both win rate and games played. Little Red has a 47% win rate over 123 plays, so a little bit of a decrease in win rate, but a pretty substantial uptick in games played, considering that Winter of Champions isn't even over yet, and she already has like 40 more plays than for the entirety of Summer of Legends. And Drac has a 49% win rate over 53 plays, so a little bit of a decrease in win rate and a pretty substantial drop-off in plays. So Red currently has the second most plays in Winter of Champions behind Yanenga. Drac is in 10th and InGen is in 11th in terms of plays. So InGen went from being the most played character to being the 11th most played character. And Drac went from being the second most played character to being the 10th most played character. And I believe this is due to their pretty not great matchups into the new Volume 2 fighters, while Red isn't at such a big disadvantage in that. And currently the meta has a lot of 50-50 matchups based on the way that the blind pick for game 1 works. So anything around 50% is fine. So like 47 and 49 for Little Red and Drac are a lot better than they seem. Basically anything between 45 and 55 is like a fine win rate. 24% is not great, to say the least. So if I'm giving my thoughts on these former high tier characters and their viability going forward, I would say InGen's time in the sun has come to an abrupt halt. I think his matchups currently and going forward are not looking great, and I don't think he'll ever be as dominant as he once was, especially in the Summer of Legends era. Little Red, on the other hand, I think will be very good going forward, considering that she's good into the best fighter in the game right now, in Yanenga, and has a pretty strong matchup into Sun Wukong, as well as just a really good matchup spread into the rest of the cast that was already in place. So if you want to learn more about Little Red and maybe get some tips on how to play her, I will put the strategy guide video of hers. The link will be in the description if you want to go watch that after this video and get learnt, as they say. And Dracula, he is Sal Volcano tonight because he is the big loser of the high tier. I think he gets wrecked worse than Muldoon from these new characters. He just has a ton of horrible matchups, and you got to be really careful when you pick Dracula going forward. Although Sinbad is really good right now because he is Yanenga's worst matchup, and Dracula is really good into Sinbad. So there is a little bit of a counterpick opportunity there, but that is a huge step down for someone that used to be like a top 5 fighter in the game. So the next question you might ask is, who is high tier right now? If these characters, especially Muldoon and Dracula, are slipping away in viability, who's going to make up the high tier? So I think Bigfoot definitely gets bumped down. He is no longer one of the best 3 characters in the game. I think he is probably like the 4th best at best. Little Red, I think, stays in high tier. Wukong will definitely be in high tier. And then it's kind of a little hazy. I think Moon Knight has a chance of being in high tier. Robin doesn't have horrible matchups into Volume 2, but just isn't that great into Yanenga. So we'll see if Moon Knight's actually good into Yananga. That'll be something to watch. Sinbad has a good matchup into Yananga, so he might be rising a little bit, but what's his overall matchup spread look like if Yananga isn't on your opponent's roster? He doesn't really do that good into Wukong or Achilles, so I don't know if he is the most viable option, or if he's just like Drac, where he's kind of a counter pick right now. And what about Achilles and Ghost Rider? I don't know. Achilles is a little too inconsistent for my taste, and I guess Ghost Rider we'll have to keep tabs on him because he's going to be a long video in the future. So I don't think there's really like a concrete high tier I can make out of these 10 fighters. But if I had to give you my best guess, I would say Bigfoot, Little Red, Wukong, and then in the next tournament, probably Moon Knight. That would be my best guess. So hopefully you enjoyed this Meta Monday. It's the best day of the week for a reason. You just got to remember that not every Monday is Meta Monday, but only Mondays can be meta. Whew. So that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a comment letting me know what you think of my assessment of these 3 characters, because I'm probably wrong about something, probably speculating on matchups a little bit incorrectly at least. So let me know what your thoughts are, what your experiences are with these characters into some of the new heroes that are threatening their positions. And yeah, have a great rest of your week. And as always, like, subscribe, and yeet!